So yeah, we can take a break for a second if you need anything. But if you have a little bit of time, I kind of have one more big question to ask.
Sure.
And typically when we do these recordings, I kind of break them up into two halves. So um, it just kind of comes out as two separate chunks. So that just kind of works for our kind of little recording process.
Yeah,
So if you
that's
have a
fine.
little more
Every
time,
podcast is a little bit
okay,
different.
yeah,
I've been on two podcasts where it's like it's live and there's only one take and there's no
yeah,
editing and whatever you say comes out. And then I was interviewing with another podcast where they have a like an editorial process that they snap every time that they have like a new section. And so there was just so much snapping happening. And so it's like, oh, we're gonna redo that. And then, trying to act like you were just uh having the conversation, but there was no video component. So there was, easier maybe.
So
that's
you were
funny.
doing takes on an audio only app.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine that.
Now that
Let's
I know
take
that's
it from the
possible, I'd be
beginning.
experiment with that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they use the snap to be able to
Yeah,
cut.
exactly.
Mhm.
That sounds super
Or to be
relaxing.
able to find it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's
One of the things that we found out in the little time we have been doing this is there is a kind of psychological tendency that we'd have a nice buttoned up 1 hour conversation. Everybody's on their best behavior, and then Aaron would stop recording, and then, oh, okay, now it's party time. What did you really want to talk about? You want to talk about politics? All right, January 6th. Oh my God, what a nightmare! And everybody just kind of opened up, and we would be getting all this like good stuff, and it's like, oh shit, that's because we knew we were being recorded, so we're just making sure we're on our best
Well, you don't
behavior.
know who your reader or your listeners are, and if you're focused mostly on writing, then you don't want to diverge also from your mission.
Of course, yeah, and I love that mission discipline. But yeah, there was something where we figured out clearly that we're in a kind of psychological experiment where everybody just got funnier and lighter weight when we stopped recording. Everybody
Yeah.
just got looser.
So then we started doing the thing where we would just say, okay, I'm not going to stop recording, but like we're done for now, and then we'll
Yeah,
continue.
that's the
Is that
premise
what kind of
behind doing
evolved?
segment 2 now. Is this is the more relaxed, and we can edit this. So if anybody steps on something they shouldn't have said, totally fair play.
Which has never happened. There's never been like, oh, wow, I gotta edit that out. Like this is out of control.
Not yet.
So for the record, yeah, not yet, I
Yeah,
should
no,
say.
we'll step on a precedent. Don't worry. We'll find out after the fact. You'll put something out, it'll trend on Twitter horribly, and then
Yeah.
we'll know.
Maybe, yeah, we'll get
Don't want to
some.
be famous for that.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, we need to get views somehow. But yeah, so that was a little bit of the story about like, yeah, we just kind of decided to do like, oh, just we'll do two halves, and it's the same conversation, but just kind of as kind of two separate things.
In
Okay.
conversation, but this is like the after party.
The after party, yeah, that's what we called it. The after party. So, oh yeah, well, we'll get to that second, but the kind of the heavy hitter question I had, and I have one direct reason for asking this, so I'll share that later, but I'm curious to see where you take it or what your first thought is. Is the question, let me get it exact. The question, what is the role of letting go in the creative process? So you were kind of getting there, Anne Marie. So I don't know, Chris or Anne Marie, who wants to start?
Yeah, you sent this question to me to ponder, and I was thinking about what it means to let go in the creative process. And I really think it has to do with letting go of your ego, of allowing people to dislike your work, to put your work out there in the face of rejection. Be rejected 400 times. Like allow yourself to be rejected 400 times and not let it deter you from continuing. And revel in the times that your poems are accepted, or your creative work, or it finds a home in a gallery if you're a visual artist. And just not allowing the I guess the end goals to then determine the process. So even if your goal is to publish a full-length collection of poems, to not change what it is that you create, to not change who it is that you are for maybe commercial appeal or what you think people want to read. Really write what it is that your soul, your spirit needs to write, because there will be people who appreciate it, even if it's not at the level that you're hoping for. But I think what might deter people who are just starting is that they don't receive that extrinsic cheerleading that they need to keep going at first. And so then they think, oh, I'm no good, and they don't continue, and they don't continue to try and get better. They have a fixed mindset that, oh, I just don't have a talent for creativity or something like that. But if it brings you joy to do it, then do it. And it doesn't matter where you are or what your level is, just do it for yourself, and let go of that feeling that it has to be accepted by anyone else. I think that's what letting go means.
Nice.
Has that been the kind of consensus with other writers or
This is
other
the first
guests?
time I've asked it in a
Oh,
setting.
it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is the very first. What he does is he'll choose a different big picture question that destroys me a little bit on the inside and my soul. So I'm gonna have to try to answer it honestly. Oh boy, what layer to start with? So I like coming at this from the Buddhist approach, because if I do it that way, it can get rid of all the second guessing I would normally do to out engineer the question. Normally, my response is, well, what do you mean by letting go? Isn't there a natural tension between the extrinsic motivation, because that feels good, but that's feeding the ego, and I also want to let go of my ego? And you threw the word joy in there. We're going to complicate this with joy. So are you trying to cling to the joy that the thing gives you? But by doing that, are you? So I immediately, my second guesser hamster wheel just wants to annihilate the question and eviscerate it from the inside out. The Buddhist approach, again, if done right, which I struggle with, that's why it's called a practice, not a doing, it's a practice, would be you let go big picture, you let go all the way. Oh, what is writing? The people that we love and us, it's all temporary. Appreciate it in the present moment. Don't cling, don't clench and try to keep this stuff close to you that's inevitably gonna pass away, as all things do. Sometimes I can come at it top down, and that'll help, because otherwise I engineer myself out of solving the problem by second guessing the problem so that it's so complex it can't be solved, which in itself is a clinging. I understand that. I say that out loud, like, you're doing it. So for me, letting go has to be kind of the big picture, like, oh, let the shoulders down. We're all going to die someday. There's probably no afterlife, and we're all just little waves, little eddies of consciousness in the big sea of consciousness. Okay, that's okay. Hey, maybe I should write a short story. So I have to really, try to step so far out of the question that the letting go has to be the biggest kind of letting go, or I get trapped in this little nest of self-created problems. So, well, if you let go this way, you're just clinging to this other thing.
What do you think, Aaron? What is letting go?
This is why I ask the questions, because I never know what I'm going to get in return. So even though we've known each other for how long, it's like I would have never.
Like, we've riffed on this for 3 hours out at
the bar. I wouldn't have said,
Yes. So particularly in the creative process, though, Aaron.
Right. So yeah, that's all good. Yeah. So the I have a very kind of tangible and kind of maybe even we can call it a practice. We can call it a letting go practice, which was on my mind because if you're listening to this, it probably just happened, but I plan to do it again at some point. But I'm hosting a poetry postcard workshop. And so the idea, I did this kind of on my own last year in April, National Poetry Month, where I sent out poetry postcards. I did them on, 4x6 watercolor paper, like heavyweight, heavy stock paper cards, draw my, my typical mountain drawings, because that's one of the only things I could draw, and I like mountains. So I could, just part of the kind of like creative practice, draw on the front side of the card, and on the back it would be kind of a little micro poem. And I, sent a bunch out as part of the Wild Roof Journal like submission process. Sent them out to the submitters for the month of April or whenever it was. And for me, that was the first time I did it last year, and that was kind of one of those kind of like revelations, like, oh, this is like something good. This is like, it's not about like what I wrote or like if the drawing's any good or if it gets to even where it's supposed to go. Once you drop it in the box, it's like, oh, in the mailbox, it's like, yeah, that's I did my job. Like I did what I needed to do, and now it's it's off to somewhere else. And just like you said, Anne Marie, it's like, yeah, the person can receive it and say, this is the best thing I've ever seen, or whatever. This is so special. Or they might see it and like, oh, okay, Mike is lost in a bunch of bills and like junk mail or something. Or they might see it and like, okay, that was nice, and like set it aside. Who knows? Like that's kind of the point, is like it's out of my hands. And I think, well, this isn't Buddhist, right? This is the Bhagavad Gita. You have the right to action. You do not have the right to the fruits of your action. So kind of mixing and matching spiritual texts here. But that's just, yeah, that's the idea. You don't, fruits of your action, okay. Who knows? Maybe it's going to inspire somebody, maybe not. So that
am I hearing from you correctly? If I can paraphrase what you explained, is that it's about the process and not the product?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so different ways of saying the same thing.
There's a message in a bottle of peel, though, that at least it's going out somewhere.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, maybe this will land on somebody. That's still exciting.
Yeah, no, that is
The journey
like this
is the
appealing
reward.
part of it. Yeah. So, but I really enjoyed like making them. That was, I mean, that's part of the equation of the it was a genuine, like I really liked the paper, and I, cutting the paper into 4x6 chunks or rectangles. And I like, I like pens, I like paper. It's just kind of like part of the fun of playing around a little bit. And yeah, so that was just kind of that moment of like the literal letting go, when you like drop it into the mailbox and saying, yeah, done, my part's done. But yeah, obviously that's kind of the reason I bring it up, is like it represents kind of the something larger, which both of you spoke to in that kind of little more abstract and little bigger picture sense. So
at that point, the medium matters. The idea that tactile paper and cutting and shaping things. Two Christmases ago, my good friend and bassist bought me a typewriter, because of course he did. And I write differently on a typewriter. You just experience it differently. You engage it differently. You see it on the page in a way that is simultaneously nostalgic but kind of alien, because we've been writing on a computer for 20 years.
And does it make a click clack sound? Click,
I love it. I love that click clack. My dad hates it, but I love it.
Click, click,
and I've been
click.
listening to him practice scales for 30 years, so that's fair. But yeah, no, it's full on. You got to go, all the way up, all the way down on each key.
Wow. What an experience.
Yeah, and I could feel it changing my relationship to not necessarily the language, but like I didn't feel as obligated to write something perfect. There's this very physical experience, and you say, well, all right, well, I'm going to write a little joke text to my friend, but I'm going to write it on typewriter, and then I'm going to take a picture of it with my phone and wish my friend happy birthday, and be like, hey, this is what text messages are going to look like after the apocalypse, and it's only typewriters. And it's like, oh, that felt really good. Like, that was me letting go, in the sense that I wasn't out to impress anybody. It was a tactile experience. It kind of puts a little novelty in the neurons, and of course, it felt really good. And I sent him a note I probably wouldn't have sent him. That's another point, is that I don't know if I would have thought to do as thoughtful a happy birthday to my friend if I didn't have the typewriter to kind of just send me in that direction.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the medium affecting the message. So typewriter is one thing, postcards, not a lot of space. So that is kind of one of those letting go things. It's like, I can't say, you know,
you
I
can't write the
you know,
Iliad on it. Yeah.
can't get out, you know, can't, because that's kind of one of my, like, either tendencies or, you know, maybe it's kind of, that was one of my learning processes as a writer, is kind of like pull back a little bit, because there would be, you kind of get lost in abstraction, or lost, you'd say something, if you weren't constrained by actual physical space, that, you know, okay, I could say this more concisely, where you wouldn't have to before, and you maybe it wouldn't be as effective.
Yes,
you can
a
get away with
postcard is
it,
then
so.
different than even a letter.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was one of another one of those little lessons, is like, yeah, just simple, don't fuss, just put it, you could only, you know, have a couple of words here, a couple of words there, you know, maybe 5 or 8 lines, I think, is the longest I can go, in about 8 lines. That's it. So that's kind of one of those things where, yeah, you're limited by space in that case, and it does shape what you're saying and the message, and how you can express what you want to express. And that was part of the trick of it, is like, you want to say something. It doesn't mean you don't just want to like say random nonsense or something that's not mean. So you want to say something kind of impactful, meaningful in a short space. That's the other angle,
Right.
of, you know,
Not just, hey, what's up?
yeah, you just kind of random things around the room, you know, in kind of a scattered way. You want to put a message there together that somebody could interact with. And so, yeah, you mentioned haiku earlier, so that's obviously kind of one of those short forms that, and when done correctly, says, you know, very small, so something, you know, very limited, but, you know, taken from another angle, says something, you know, very, you know, pretty deep, if you're doing it right.
Or
So that was
surprising.
kind of, yeah, or surprise, just different, or just a shift of perspective. I guess it doesn't even have to be deep or too thoughtful. It's just, that's, you know, in that context, you know, whatever, a cracked teapot could be like, oh, that's, what does that mean? You know, or it might just be, you know, that's what's on the counter over there.
We make the
And,
meaning.
Yeah.
and you said something about appreciating forms if you're working within a specific poetic format, and it's somebody that annoys me, like Jocko Willink, that the quote was, in limitations there freedom, something like that. The idea that with
I
parameters,
have heard
then,
that before. Yes.
and so, yeah, I feel like that's a good cheat code for letting go, because it's like, you have less responsibility. If you say you have infinite paper to write infinite great stuff, go. That blue sky problem. But then if you have parameters, you got guardrails, you're like, all right, I have to be creative within these guardrails, so the guardrails actually create an opportunity for some freedom of movement that your brain might, in my case, put a chokehold around otherwise, because of the paralysis of choice.
For sure. I know that feeling too. I also get the paralysis of choice. Like to have maybe up to 3 choices, then I'm good.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, thanks for your thoughts on that. So I knew there was kind of something to that question, and I liked where both of you took it. I guess part of the other connection point I'm reading right now, Pema Chodron's book, The Wisdom of No Escape, which sounds pretty intense, and it's a lovely book. And the 3 principles in that book are gentleness, precision, and letting go. So those 3 things have been on my mind. Maybe next time around I'll ask, what is precision in the writing process?
What was the name of it again?
The book is called The Wisdom of No Escape.
The Wisdom of No Escape. I'm gonna have to write that down.
Yeah. Yeah. So Anne Marie, not sure if did you pick a selection from the new issue? I mentioned it. I don't know if you got around to it. No worries if you didn't.
I mean, I didn't right off the top of my I did pull up Prairie Fire, but I do, I mean, this is my proof copy of the book with the old book cover. It has a new book cover now that you can see on social media and my website. This was the original book cover idea. And that's
an awesome title, by the way. You came up with that first. It sounds so inevitable and so perfect as a title for that kind of project.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously an homage to obituary text, but then also writing this collection helped me survive. So I survived by writing it. So kind of a play on words. One of the poems that is sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
I was just gonna say, you could kind of take us out with one of your poems. Just kind of, you can read it, and we won't talk about this one and analyze and pick it apart or anything. So you can take your time to make your selection and just read it to us, and that'll close us out in a wonderful way.
So I'm just gonna talk about it a little bit, just because the form is interesting. So it utilizes also white space, but then also it fades out on the page. And so this collection experiments with poetic forms that utilize white space, as well as like concrete poetry, and just having really unique ways of fitting on the page. I have one poem that the video is going to be showing, right? Or no? Yes. Okay, that's
it'll be both. Yeah, audio and visual, but yeah.
So I have one poem that begins on the bottom left of the page and then is read from the bottom left up to the top right. So I'll show that one to you just really quick. So it looks like this in the book. So it kind of has this like upward from the bottom to the top. So there's just, a couple, there's several poems that utilize the page in unique ways that I at least haven't seen before in other poetry collections other than Douglas Kearney, but he really creates like poetic visual art rather than like poems for the page. It's more of an artistic experience, in my opinion. Okay, so I'm going to read a poem called Grief is the Ghost. And this is the poem that fades out on the page. Grief is the ghost, the wraith that appears erratic from the earth, to breathe behind your ear, a reminder of your errors and oh, your fool's errands. Grief is the ghost, the sibilant specter that slithers like a second skin that refuses to shed. Oh, the flakes, they sheathe your scales. Grief is the ghost, the phantom that foams at the mouth, the aura forging frowns through the furrows. It's in your in your pillows. Oh, it's flailing in the feathers. Grief is the ghost that still haunts this house, this living house. And oh, how it's still, and oh, how it lives. Thank you.
Beautiful. I don't think I've ever seen a poem fade, like, it literally fade on the page, and that's something.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope that this collection achieves a few different things. I hope that it is interesting for people to read, that they're surprised by what they see in the collection. But then I also hope that it's the book that someone needs to read. It's the book that I needed to read, and it helped me stay afloat during a really drowning experience. And so I'm hoping that others find it equally as buoyant for them.
I mean, it's a great word.
Absolutely.
You know, W.S. Merwin,
Yes.
friend or foe?
The poem Separation.
Mm.
It's only 3 lines, but it's what I read that poem, I don't know how many times, 200 times now. Your loss runs through me like a thread and a needle. Everything I do is colored in your thread, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or everything I do is stitched in your color. That's what it is. And I don't know how many times I read that poem, and it's so meaningful to me. I could get it tattooed on me if I had the disposable income to get a tattoo. But yeah, that's a poem that helped me get through just reading it over and over, knowing that somebody else felt what I was feeling.
The fact that he popped into my brain after you read yours is a compliment, because it means it hit me in a similar way. And he's the poem that snuck through my radar and attacked me in the soft tissue was A Single Autumn, which is about losing both parents. And I was one of those things where I started reading it like, nope, stone cold. I'm fine. I'm going to approach this cynically in a distance. I was basically in tears by the end. Could barely see the end of the poem in my hands. So yeah,
Yes.
so that's if a poem can do that and kind of create that sense of like, that's the poem that I needed at the time I needed it, and that's what I was reminded of when you read yours. I think is pretty great.
Thank you.
And just to follow the rule of 3, my W.S. Merwin recommendation is a poem called Exercise, which I think pretty nicely fits our theme of letting go, oddly enough. I think that's a kind of a parallel with that poem. So yeah, Chris, I'll give you credit, because I think I got into W.S. Merwin on your recommendation.
Yeah, that was one of those
However
poems
long
just
ago
like,
that
man,
was, yeah. So yeah, we're all on the same page there, which is nice. So yeah, I think that we'll call it a night. We'll call it a podcast.
Okay, what a
Thanks
great
so much.
conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anne Marie, Chris, for joining us again.
Thank you, Aaron, for hosting.
You're welcome. Talk to you again soon.
All right, well then I'll say goodnight to you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And then we'll be in touch. Okay, bye.